Relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Set to make her U.S. debut this weekend on the undercard of Hitchens versus Zepeda, Sandy Ryan on Jessica McCaskill. I feel that with my ability, I am at another level to her, what is the unification match between them.
There are 3 champions at this weight: Sandy, Jessica, and Natasha.
This is just massive for me, said Ryan. Jessica is up there. She is on the pound-for-pound list, and that's where I want to be. So I need to beat girls like her to be where she is. I really respect Jessica as a fighter. And you'll see that this week, with the shape that I am in and the mentality that I have, I remember watching her against Katie Taylor, and she's done so well since then. She's always been in the big fights, and she's won most of them. She's tough. She's going to come with everything. She's never been stopped, and she knows the pro game because she's been in it for a long time. So she knows all the tricks, but I feel that with my ability, I am at another level to her. I'm not going off the Chantel Cameron fight, as I think she had a bad night.
It was more like a bad style matchup.
Jessica McCaskill, I'm sure you're all aware, is a pressure fighter, a particularly aggressive pressure fighter.
Chantel's a boxer-puncher.
The advantage that a boxer-puncher has over a pressure fighter is pressure fighters primarily only have one way of fighting a fight, whereas boxer-punchers, they have the fundamentals of the pure boxer with the aggression of the pressure fighter, a marriage between the two.
Chantel was a boxer-puncher, and so is Sandy Ryan.
Sandy, you said, I'm not going off the Chantel Cameron fight, as I think she had a bad night. I've had a bad night, and I don't think anyone would look at me with that performance. I can see that there's some bad habits from that fight, but she will be training her heart out for this fight, because if she loses, it's her last fight. She'll have nothing, no belts. That's why I am making sure I am fully prepared.
She better.
She's going to see, isn't she? I don't need to say much. We'll see on Saturday night. Just be ready. Keep the belts warm for me. It's all about the big fights now for me. This is massive, but the level I am at, if I win this fight, I want to be undisputed, and there's nothing bigger. So this is the level I am now. You never know in boxing what is going to happen, but now I am at this level. I feel I am here to stay. Every pro wants to hold all the belts. That's the aim. It's legacy. Welterweight is where I am at. I've done 140 pounds as well. There are some massive fights that can be made with all the best girls. Let me get all the belts at 147, and then let's make all the big fights.
As stated, there are 3 champions at this weight. Sandy Ryan is one, Jessica McCaskill is the other, and Natasha Jonas, who's over there on the Boxer and Sky Sports side of things.
If Sandy Ryan is successful this weekend, there will only be 2 champions at this weight. Natasha Jonas means to defend her title later on this year or early next year against Michaela Mayer.
Talked about that.
If Natasha wins the fight, I don't get the sense she's going to be interested in doing more business with Matchroom, but if Michaela wins, given that she's some years younger than Natasha, more good years left to give to the sport, she might be interested in facing the winner of this weekend's fight, the winner of McCaskill versus Ryan.
Cross that bridge when we get to it.
I think I can be a star in the game. I'm quite low-key, but I know what I can achieve, and I can be a massive name in the women's pro scene. This will be Sandy Ryan's U.S. debut.
Boxer-puncher versus pressure fighter.
Stylistically, a repeat of what we saw in Jessica McCaskill's last fight with Chantel Cameron, with the difference being that Chantel, though being a boxer-puncher, was a more experienced fighter. A more experienced fighter overall going into that fight than Sandy is going into this one.
So while Sandy has the right style for the job, the question is, does she also have the right level of experience?
She ready for this. The advantage the boxer-puncher has over the pressure fighter is that pressure fighters primarily have one gear and one way of fighting a fight, and that's coming forward and applying pressure, whereas the boxer-puncher is a bit more adaptable.
They can fight coming forwards, they can fight moving backwards, they can fight moving sideways.
They're not limited to just coming forward like a pressure fighter is. Oftentimes, when you back off a pressure fighter and force them onto their back foot, they fall apart.
If you can back them off.
Boxer punchers, like Sandy Ryan, often can, because unlike the pure boxer, they're not spending the whole fight and the whole round trying to create space to set up counters. Boxer punchers exhibit a little bit more spike than pure boxers do, so they'll step into their jab and bring other punches over. They'll fight off that pressure fighter when they have to and back them off.
Boxer punchers, the good ones, they've got in and out game.
And it's all in the name. They can box when they need to and punch when they need to. That's the advantage that a boxer puncher has over a pressure fighter.
Managing distance is one of the bigger advantages they have.
You know what the pressure fighter's gonna do? You know they're gonna come forward.
They're all about closing the distance, whereas boxer-punchers, they manage it.
Using the pressure fighter's forward momentum against them to maintain a bit of space to get off punches.
Bit of infighting, but also being able to take a break, take breaks in the action.
Stylistically, Sandy Ryan has the edge over Jessica.
Does she have the right experience, though?
As experience really is the best teacher, and what experience teaches the boxer-puncher in situations like this is poise, temperance.
Poise under pressure, temperance in the storm. That's what it takes to beat a really aggressive pressure fighter.
Because if nothing else, you know they're going to bring it. You need to be ready for it. We'll see what happens between Sandy and Jessica this weekend. Men's super middleweight news. Canelo Alvarez says, I still feel young, fresh. I never think about the end of my career.
Some feel that Canelo Alvarez is on the slide. Others feel he's going to walk through Jermell Charlo. He's going to stop him.
I personally think two things can be true at the same time. As many fights as Canelo Alvarez has had, it's possible that there are signs of slippage. It's possible. Though Canelo himself says, I still feel young, fresh, and I never think about the end of my career. I just train and fight every year, and we'll see. We'll see in the future. But I'm still young, I feel great, I feel strong, and I feel I'm at my best.
He's effectively rebounded off the loss to Dmitry Bivol with wins over Gennady Golovkin in their trilogy and John Ryder.
The world is still very much his oyster. He is still the most sought-after fighter anywhere in between 147 and 175 pounds. Everybody wants a piece.
If he beats Jermell Charlo, there are questions as to what he will do after that. Will he face David Benavidez, or rather the winner of Benavidez versus Andre, if they ever finalize that fight?
Or will he fight Terence Crawford, who's determined to move up in weight and dethrone him to establish himself as this era's best fighter?
We'll see.
He's got to get through Jermell Charlo first, and Jermell Charlo, he himself admitted that he's nervous ahead of this thing. This is a bigger stage at a bigger weight than any weight he's ever fought. That can cause some fighters, if they're not ready for the moment, it can cause some fighters to shrink.
Whereas for Canelo, it's just another big stage, just another day at the office.
And another big payday. If Canelo Alvarez was able to sell just north of 800,000 pay-per-view buys with Caleb Plant, I anticipate he could do the same or better with Jermell Charlo.
I think.
Though some are not impressed with his opponent's selection, some feel that he's traversing the path of least resistance. Unbeaten up-and-comer David Morrell says, Canelo doesn't want to fight anyone dangerous.
Some people think he's taking it easy fighting Jermell, you know, because Jermell campaigns at 154.
Few nuances aside, that's how some people feel about it. That's how David Morrell feels about it. David Morrell, who says, Canelo is different from the Canelo of 3 years ago.
Oh?
Well, he hated to admit it. Even Alvarez recently acknowledged that he hasn't looked like the smooth, hard-hitting star that picked up world titles in 4 separate weight classes as of late come September 30th. Nevertheless, the Mexican luminary promised to prove that he hasn't lost a step. With that said, considering that his opponent, Jermell Charlo, who competes naturally at 154, Morrell has a hard time believing what Alvarez has recently said. At the moment, the super middleweight division is jam-packed with high-quality names, well-known and worthy fighters. Morrell, though, is curious as to why Charlo was given the call.
That's how David feels.
How I feel? There are fighters anywhere in between 147 and 175 pounds looking for a Canelo Alvarez fight. This fighter in particular, Jermell Charlo, is one of several fighters that Canelo was accused of avoiding.
Does everybody have amnesia?
He was accused of avoiding the Charlo brothers alongside Demetrius Andrade and David Benavidez.
Does everybody have amnesia?
After giving it a bit of thought, Morrell believes he knows why Charlo was given the unexpected shot in the first place. In his opinion, Canelo doesn't want to fight anyone dangerous.
As opposed to all the dangerous fights everybody else is taking.
Consider that David Benavidez didn't want to fight David Morrell. He preferred to fight Jaime Munguia. Jaime Munguia didn't want to fight David Benavidez just yet. He would prefer to fight Edgar Berlanga.
And according to Oscar De La Hoya, Edgar Berlanga, he's not ready for Jaime Munguia. This is the state at super middleweight.
Bunch of guys Bunch of unbeaten guys, undefeated, all playing keep away, all staying away from each other.
So how could I lambast Canelo?
He's the only one of these guys at super middleweight with the track record, with the history of providing big fights and providing the fans with the fights that they aspire to see. Whether you're talking about the Mayweather fight, the Cotto fight, the Golovkin fights,
Jacobs,
the undisputed run at super middleweight, and the 2 stints at light heavyweight. The Wiz, how am I supposed to hold this guy's feet to the fire when he's got the track record, he's got the history of providing big fights, and these guys don't? If we need to criticize anybody for not taking on dangerous fights, it's everybody else, not Canelo.
rumblings about Benavidez versus Andre, but that hasn't been finalized yet. Neither has Munguia versus Berlanga.
You're always hearing about these deep weight classes, deep divisions with deep talent pools, but they're just a bunch of wallflowers. Very few of these guys want to actually hit the dance floor.
Even funnier is that Canelo's actually a more active fighter than these guys.
Keeps a busier schedule than many of these fighters. So when you're busier than your contemporaries, it's not uncommon to take a few easy fights in between the bigger fights.
I think if anybody deserves a break, Canelo does, even if you do interpret this as a lighter touch.
Canelo Alvarez himself says, "You'll see I'm the king of boxing after the Charlo fight."
And unless these guys are keeping the same schedule as Canelo Alvarez, fighting the same fighters, the same caliber of fighters that Canelo's fighting, they really ought to pipe down.
Boxing-wise, I wasn't 100%, but critics are always looking for something, aren't they? And obviously, I agree with them that I haven't looked at the last few fights like I used to, and I don't want to just give a rebuttal. I'd prefer to show them. And in this fight, you are going to see the difference, Alvarez said on the 2nd episode of Showtime's docu-series, All Access. I can't wait for September 30th. This fight, you'll see I'm the king of boxing.
But what exactly is Canelo Alvarez doing differently to look more invigorated in this fight than he has his last 3?
He's training at high altitude for starters. He's moved his camp over to Truckee, California.
Virtue of training at high altitude.
It's a stamina benefit is what it is. If you're training at high altitude, the virtue of doing so is an added stamina benefit. And Canelo Alvarez has often been criticized for gassing out and taking rounds off in the middle of a fight.
This upcoming fight's gonna test his stamina because I've no doubts Jermell Charlo has every intention of sticking and moving, staying on the move, and staying on the outside.
He's a fighter that hits hard. He's a good boxer that knows how to use distance. That's what makes him dangerous, said Alvarez. This is one of the best camps I've ever had in every sense. How calm I am. How we've been training. I've been training at 100%. This helps me stay focused on the fight and will give me confidence when it's time to fight. In the past, Canelo Alvarez had an issue with his knee. In more recent years, he had an issue with his hand.
He claims he feels good. He claims he's training at 100%. But how many times have you heard a fighter say, "This is the best camp I've ever had"?
Ultimately, the performance is what's going to tell the story. And Jermell Charlo being a junior middleweight, this being his first fight at 168, and Canelo Alvarez saying that he's firing on all cylinders, people are expecting him.
They're expecting him to back it up.
They're expecting that under these circumstances, he should look like the Canelo Alvarez of old. Let's see if he does later on this month. Finally, in men's heavyweight news, ahead of this weekend's mega rematch, Joyce on Usyk versus Dubois. It was frustrating seeing a guy that I beat convincingly got the shot before me.
The irony of it all.
It was frustrating that it was the guy I beat convincingly that got the shot before me, Joyce told BoxingScene.com. And it bothers me that I was once the WBA gold champion and paid the sanctioning fees, and then I was completely out of that mix. That's a route I could have taken, but I did the WBO route, and I'm in that position again. But to have to lose to Zhang when I was so close and I could have just waited and took a different shot, it was quite a hard time and lesson to learn.
I don't begrudge Joyce choosing to grab the bull by the horns and take on a formidable fighter in Zhilei Zhang.
Even though it backfired and it didn't work out for him, the sport of boxing, and the heavyweight division specifically, more specifically, the heavyweight division needs more fighters like Joyce that are willing to get out there and roll the dice.
Think about the fighters that Joyce has fought. A world title challenger in Bryant Jennings, a former champion in Bermain Stavern,
a seasoned gatekeeper in Carlos Takam, and a world-class southpaw in Zhilei Zhang.
Only for Daniel Dubois to get a title shot before him. Bear in mind, he beat Daniel.
I don't really have time to piece my way back another way, so I have to, Joyce said. because I could have had a fight in the meantime. Someone could have fought Zhang instead, or Zhang could have had the opportunity at the WBO title. But this is why I enacted the immediate rematch clause, so I can get back in position.
And at his age, he has to. He doesn't have the luxury of time. In truth, neither does Zhang. They're both in the same age range.
It's a now or never kind of deal for both Zhang and Joe, a now or never kind of moment. Zhilei Zhang, ahead of this fight, ahead of this rematch, he says, Joe Joyce doesn't move his head, doesn't change angles, makes my job easier.
When you develop a reputation for having a cast iron chin, all that really means is that you're getting touched up, you're getting hit, and you're getting hit hard.
Many were singing Joe Joyce's praises after he trampled Joseph Parker, one of the more polite heavyweights in today's heavyweight division, not realizing you can't stand up to everybody's punch. You can't stand up to everyone's power. It's quite enjoyable to be in the ring with him, Zhang tells Standard Sport. He's not moving his head, he's not changing his position and angles. That makes my job easier. During the fight, Zhang took some heavy blows and continued to come forward. He is definitely heavy-handed, but not as heavy as I would have imagined, Zhang said. Zhang was in talks to fight WBC heavyweight champion Tyson Fury when those negotiations were derailed by Joyce exercising his immediate rematch clause.
I remember those talks, and I didn't have much stock in them.
It doesn't matter now. For some time, we've been seeing Joe Joyce weather some heavy shots, some heavy blows from Bryant Jennings. I remember how many right hands he landed in their fight, but Bryan's not known for power. I remember Christian Hammer connecting several times with overhand rights. And Joe was able to stand up to those punches, but not Zhang's.
Zhang hits harder than those guys.
I was a little bit surprised when I first heard about the rematch, Zhang said. It's in the contract. I knew he would activate it one way or another, but I didn't expect it to be so fast. I would have expected him to fight one or two interim fights in between. Get used to a style and then take the rematch. It's not rocket science that you can't change to a different style in a few months. That's why the second fight will end even quicker. I don't do anything other than eat, sleep, and train. At this age, I still feel I can compete for the heavyweight title. I am 100% confident that I will beat all these guys.
Zhang hit the nail on the head. You don't just all of a sudden become a different fighter overnight, or in this situation, after just a few months.
Especially when you're a pressure guy like Joe Joyce. Joe Joyce, he's a pressure fighter. And pressure fighters don't change much fight by fight, if at all.
They've got one gear.
And one way of fighting a fight. If it ever gets to a point to where you develop a reputation for having a cast iron chin, I reiterate, all that means is you're getting hit, and you're getting hit hard.
Joe's had that reputation a while.
Accenting Joe Joyce's lack of defense, head movement, and angles. That this guy's big and he's strong, but he don't protect himself.
Old habits.
But they are, and you know what they say about old habits? They're hard to break.